Okay, so I've been asked to do a video explaining how I accomplished the DRZ400 fork swap on my DR350. So I figure we'll just start at the top, work our way down. We'll pop the fairing off here. So to mount the gauge cluster, see I just made a little L bracket, bolted it to the top triple clamp and to the gauge cluster, one on each side. Worked out pretty good. These are stock DR350 that normally have like a right angle bend on them. I just straighten them out for signal mounts. That worked out quite well. For the headlight mount, I cut the rings off of the stock DR350 that went around the stock fork tubes, and these are like some gate hardware or something I found at Home Depot. I've seen some of these rubber insulated that would be better to use, but this is what I had, this is what I used. I have no problem with it. So it allows me to keep the stock fairing, stock headlight, and I can slide it up and down a little bit. And it works. The original fender bolted to the lower triple. Now, I did have to use handlebar risers to get clearance to slide the fork tubes up a little bit to get a proper height and angle on them. So it's not required, but depending on your bike and what angle you want. I like the stock angle, so I needed just a little bit more clearance. So that's what the handlebar risers come in for. Now I'll get that nut off and hopefully you can see the spacer in there. So now you need to make a spacer to go between, make up the slack between the diameter of the top of the steering stem and the DRZ400 triple. This is the DR350 steering stem and the bearings. All that's DR350. I pressed the DR350 stem out of the original triples and I pressed it into the DRZ400 lower triple. That works no problem. You just need a spacer now for the top. So that, let's get my caliper out. It's just under 22 mil. The inside of this one is 24.88, so pretty much 2 mil difference. When I did it, I had recently purchased a tool cart. It came with a handle. I did not need the handle. This is from that. You can still see the red paint on the inside. I sanded it off the outside. I put a slit in it, and when compressed, with that slit in there, that's the perfect size for that spacer. Let's just get a thickness on that. .25 mil. So that was a 25.5 mil OD and 22.5 Indy before I cut the slit in it. With the slit in, it's the perfect size. So like I said earlier, the DR350 steering stem is pressed into the DRZ400 lower triple. I do have access to a press at work. You can kind of see it in there. It is tight there. I did have to clearance it a little bit with a Dremel, but not very much. It is close, but it does clear. And that's all stock DR350 bearings. And it does fit. Although, if you had the ability to make this nut a little bit thinner, that would be ideal. But without it, that is okay. So now, brake. This is the stock 1998 DR350 caliper. DR350 calipers, DRZ400 calipers, and I believe DR650 calipers are all the same. At least on DR350s after 1996, whenever they went to the 6-bolt brake rotor. It's the same as the DRZ400 and the DR650. This bike is a 90, but it had the 1998 front end on it, so that worked. And originally, we did this fork conversion on my girlfriend's 1994 DR350. So this is the 1994 front wheel with the 4-bolt brake rotor. It's the same diameter, maybe give or take a few mil. It's close enough to work without issue. And it's the same thickness, maybe give or take a mil or two. I don't know for sure, but it works. So a 1994 DR350 front wheel. And you could use a 98 or a 96 or up if you had it. But this is just the way we did it. Coming over to the other side of the wheel. That is a DRZ400 street model. I don't know, whatever one had the spoked front wheel. That is the speedometer drive from it. I had to clearance it a tiny little bit. You can kind of see right there where it's close to the head of the spoke. I had to clearance it a tiny little bit, but not a lot. It's just plastic, nice and easy. Now lastly, wheel bearings. So the wheel bearings was fun. The DR350, before 96, whenever it had the 4-lug rotor, had a 15mm axle. When they went to the 6-lug, they had a 17mm axle. The DRZ400 axle is 20mm. So, and the bearing outside diameter on all DR350s, to my knowledge, is 35mm outer diameter. That's what this one is. That's what my later model wheel was. DRZ400 is 37mm, so you can't just swap DRZ400 bearings into the DR350 wheel. I believe DR650s are the same as this, but I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. So, if you go looking for a bearing with a 35mm outside diameter and a 20mm inside diameter, it's going to be very hard to find. I found it on one site. That was bearingscanada.com, which worked out well because I'm in Canada, and it seems to be a one-off size. But I do have that. That's how I did it. Inside the hub, there's a spacer between the two bearings. I made that myself. What I did is I kept the DRZ400 steering stem. I cut the middle section out of the stem, the not machine part, and it was very close to 20mm on the inside of that tube. And the inside diameter, this is probably going to be very controversial, but it doesn't have to be exactly 20mm. As long as it contacts the inner race on both bearings, relatively squarely, like you're not like on the seal or anything, it's close enough. So what I did is I actually bought a 13/16 drill bit, which is just under 21mm. It's kind of between 20 and 21. And I drilled out the center of that stem and it worked out quite well. And inside the hub, there is a little bit of a lip that prevents you from putting the thicker spacer in. I clearanced that with a Dremel, and I haven't had any problems. You don't have to clearance it much. Just that, little tiny bit to fit that spacer in. And this spacer is stock DRZ400. I got it with the axle. It fits the seal for the DR350 wheel. It fits that no problem. Now, again, using the same method, I made one more spacer there. I don't have the exact width. I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out. That is, as I put the axle in the forks with no wheel, tightened it down until it looked pretty square and it didn't feel like there was any stiction. And I just kind of made spacers to fit. What I did is I had in the center spacer I made, I had two bearings, this spacer, the speedo drive, and then I kind of measured the distance. And what I did is I put the wheel on, centered the disc in the brake, and then I cut these a little bit larger than I needed and finished them very lightly with a hand file until they fit. And I don't have any stiction. There's one there, one there, and I haven't had any issues. No wheel bearing failures, no stiction, no loose wheels, nothing like that. So that's how I did that. But it is a lot of work, and it would be a lot nicer if you had like a lathe or something, access to a lathe to make spacers, or knew somebody with access to a lathe, or you just are able to get the DR350 21-inch wheel. That's probably the best way to do it, but they're expensive. There weren't any around me. Even if you can get a hub, they're still pretty expensive, so it's not always an option. These bearings were cheap. They were like maybe $11 a piece from Bearings Canada. But it's going to be a bearing that you're not going to be able to find, so maybe order spares if you do order from Bearings Canada, just in case, because they're not going to be easy to find. But yeah, I have to say, big improvement over the 43 millimeter fork tubes, especially for me. I'm a bigger guy. I'm coming up on 250 pounds, so definite improvement, and I haven't had any road issues at all. In fact, last week I took my road test on it, passed, by the way. On the highway, country roads, dirt roads, feels very well-mannered and a noticeable improvement over the stock cartridge forks. And I can only imagine a huge improvement over the earlier damper rod forks. And there's quite tunable. You can get springs for these forks, left, right, and center. So I think that covers it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this helped you out.